Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Breakdown with Bethany. I'm Bethany Ron Silva, and today my guest is Lauren Bongiorno. Lauren is a type 1 diabetes health coach and the founder of Risely, which is a type 1 diabetes coaching community organization. They do so much to help people with type 1 diabetes, including parents of kids who are newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And Lauren and her organization have really changed my relationship to my own diabetes, which I've mentioned that I have and have recently been talking more about. So, we're going to be talking all about Lauren's tips for managing diabetes in pregnancy, how she prepped for pregnancy, and so much more. And if you are a parent of a child who is newly diagnosed or you're not sure where to go, even after years of a type 1 diabetes diagnosis, Lauren is an excellent resource and really the go-to person for something like that. And I'm just so honored I got the chance to talk to her. So check it out. Lauren, it's funny to say a fan, right? Because you're so much more than, like a celebrity in our diabetes world. You bring so many tools and inspiration and encouragement. And I would love for you first to intro yourself, tell us who you are, but then if you wouldn't mind sharing your diagnosis story, as I'm asking a lot in an order. So introduce yourself, tell us your diagnosis story, and then I also want to know how diabetes sort of have became your purpose. So if that all can flow, I can give you reminders if you forget along the way.
Okay, so diagnosis first, and then
Well, first let's tell us about who you are and what you do.
Bethany, thank you so much for having me. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 7 years old. It's an autoimmune disease, as you know, and I think a lot of people are familiar with, diabetes as a whole, but only 5% of everybody who has diabetes, has type 1. So when I was diagnosed when I was 7, it was a shock because there's, not a lot of people in my family knew what it was. And we were very privileged in the fact that I had great doctors. I had great access to healthcare. Not a lot of people, not everybody does, and especially in the United States. And still growing up, I struggled. So when I was diagnosed, it was very much just like straightforward, count your carbs, limit your sugar, and give insulin and do the best you can. And so, after pretty much like a decade, a little bit more of that, of just following those rules, I was like, man, like my numbers are going up, they're going down. This is like getting exhausting. Like there has to be a better way. And then I kind of like went out on my own journey of like figuring out how to live, I guess, like a more balanced, fulfilled life with type 1 diabetes that wasn't so draining. And that's like, a big part of what has led me here today with Risely Health and all the people that we work to impact their lives to help them reclaim their life with diabetes.
And when did you start Risely Health? And I understand, your own journey with diabetes was the catalyst, but when did it become like to help yourself and then make it about helping others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was on the track to go to law school. I come from a family of like all attorneys, and I was like, all right, I'm really interested in health and I'm interested in helping people really have the healthiest life that they can possibly have. Like I was a Division 1 athlete in college, like was always surrounded by, kind of just that like mentality of we have one body, let's take care of it. And so I thought that I would go into like lobbying for better healthcare laws in the US and using my law degree to do that. And it was like my senior year of college. I was applying to law school. I had taken the LSATs twice where I had this epiphany where I'm like, I don't want to fight for years to see like, again, so much red tape to see nothing change. Like I really want to be like at the forefront of like seeing that impact on a very intimate level. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. And so when I told my family I wasn't going to law school, the obvious question was like, oh, so you're going to medical school? And I was like, no, not quite. Like there's this new thing called health coaching, and I really want to pursue that. And they're like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, what is this? And at the time, there wasn't a lot of coaching. It was not as big as it is today. And there was nobody really doing it in the type 1 space. But I was just like, there's something to the fact that, most people do not get the support they need in a 15-minute doctor's appointment. And the healthcare system does not have the resources and support to help people reclaim the life that they deserve. So there's what health coaching does is it's really helping people get to the root blocks, helping them understand what their goals are, helping them create sustainable behavior change and holding their hand outside to outside of the appointment so that they can improve their outcomes. And sure enough, like just starting to work with clients after very early on getting that certification, like I was like, oh, there's something to this. And so, now almost 10 years later, we have a team of 20 people, 11 coaches on the team. We have a methodology that we built to really help people with type 1, both men and women, but also parents of kids that have type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be asking you about that. And I think, the thing that I find so fascinating and intriguing about what you guys do at Risley is that sort of with all chronic conditions, there really isn't a one size fits all approach. And I think that's especially true with diabetes, given that one day you could be doing the same thing day to day, but maybe also seeing different results based on, I don't know, hormones or where you are in your cycle if you're a woman. And then
Yeah.
certainly pregnancy plays a big part in that. And so I was diagnosed in 2002. I was 17, and only until like the last year or so I've actually started talking about it on my podcast, bringing on people like you and things like that. And I think I would love to hear your take on this because diabetes is manageable, right? And we can kind of, I don't know, like I hid it for a long time. I hid it because I had a pump or I was giving injections and it wasn't something that I was open with. And I think part of me was thinking like, oh, I can just manage it. I don't really need to, it just almost like it doesn't exist, right? I was able to compartmentalize it so much that it was just like this kind of other thing that I did. And I'm wondering if you have an opinion on that, if that's something that you see also and with people that you work with in your coaching practice.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it is I don't want to say if it's oversimplified. I think because the nature of type 1 diabetes is actually so complex. There's so many different factors to your point. I think there was a study done that showed over 42 different factors impact your blood sugar on any given day, right? Like that's a lot. And so what the healthcare system's job is to keep you away from the danger zones, right? It's to keep you out of those like high highs, those low lows. And the daily management really is up to you. But that depends on, right, like how much you're willing to accept that responsibility, how, accepting you are of your just, yeah, that diagnosis and what it really does take to live a confident, empowered life with diabetes. But what I have found, Bethany, is that there's it's overwhelming when you think about like, oh, there's 42 different factors. Like I can't possibly understand how hormones and insulin sensitivity and food and exercise and all these things play. But what I find is that it's actually more overwhelming to live in a place where you don't understand because you're constantly just like running around being like, I don't know why my blood sugar is high, or I don't know what I can do differently to impact, my numbers tomorrow, or I'm, just at this place where I don't want to spend more time on my diabetes, but ultimately spending more time up front is the thing that's going to give you more of that freedom and confidence on the back end.
Right. And would you say also, so when I was trying to get pregnant almost 14 years ago now, my gynecologist or my OB was not a high risk OB or anything like that, but she told me I needed 6 months of absolute perfect blood sugars, low A1C to even
Mhm.
think about getting pregnant. And I'm wondering, how did you prepare your body, your mindset for becoming pregnant? And also, like, what would you tell another woman with type 1 diabetes who's sort of ready to take that next step in her family planning?
I love that. I also commend you for, I mean, like 14 years ago, there was not even like online community resources. Like it must have felt really like isolating and like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to do this? But, there's right now, I would say, so much out there that shows us that like if your body and your blood sugars are in a safe and healthy range, like yes, you do have more risk for things like preeclampsia or having a larger baby, like things that are outside of your control. But there is a lot that can influence the health of your baby and also just like the increasing your ability to get pregnant in the first place. So I would say for me, for the past 5 years, my A1C has been like under a 6, like a 5.8, 5.9. And what they say is the research shows you want 3 months of of your A1C below a 6.5 because those 3 months of before you start trying to conceive, that's going to impact the health of obviously your eggs. And then once you do get pregnant, then it is A1C under 6 with at least 70% of the time of your blood sugars between 63 and 140. So that's what you're shooting for. For me, like my whole theme of my life is like, I just don't want diabetes to ever hold me back from doing anything. And so I saw it as like, I definitely want to have kids. I know like my husband and I are, sometime in the next couple of years going to want that. And I don't want that moment of me feeling like, okay, I'm ready to then be just kind of, like I don't know, like dampened by, oh wait, but like my blood sugars aren't in a great place. So I spent, a lot of years kind of getting myself to the place of readiness, but not for pregnancy, more so just for myself. And then knowing that like, oh, okay, like, and when I'm ready to get pregnant, my body is going to be, ready for that. So that's kind of how I approached it.
I love that. And I do remember with my diagnosis, I was a teenager, or like kind of like the end of my teenage years. But I do remember the really intense and traumatic toll it took on my parents. And I know that you've talked about this. I've heard you talk about this as well. And we're seeing more, celebs like come out and talk about their children's diagnosis. I know Chrissy Teigen's one of them with her son Miles. There's a few others. And it's becoming just, I think because there is more community, there's more of a space to talk about it, publicly, that it is kind of opening up this forum. But I do know that there are parents out there who, you were kind of like the go-to person. They're reaching out to you, not for themselves, but for their children. So I'd love to talk about that. Like if you're a parent navigating a new diagnosis for your little one, what do you want to tell them? Like first and foremost.
Yeah, no, I love that we're giving space to this. I think first and foremost is that as much as this is your child's diagnosis, right, this is your journey as well. Because when you become a parent, everyone's like, do you want a boy? Do you want a girl? Like right now, everybody, I'm a month and a half away from giving birth, and everyone's asking that same question. And I'm like, you just say, I just want a healthy baby, right? Of course, there's preferences. My husband's really pulling for a boy, but like, at the end of the day, it's a healthy baby. And then all of a sudden, your child gets this diagnosis, and that like wish and that manifestation and that hope for your child's life, like is kind of, it's threatened. And so you have to really make peace with what is your relationship to that diagnosis for your child, because what we see a lot of the times is that the parents and the way that they relate to their kids diabetes or their kids CGM, their blood sugars, all of that is going to impact directly on how that child is going to relate to their blood sugars and their diabetes. So for instance, if a down arrow, right, like makes you, this is just like one specific incident, but like if a down arrow as a parent is like, you're freaking out, you're running around the house and you're like, oh my God, like, okay, we need sugar, like, and that panic, right? We see at least 40% of the adults that come through our programs at Risely, like where their main block, Bethany, is like literally a fear of lows. Doesn't matter what you can tell them about, hey, if you don't get your A1C down, your blood sugar's down, there's gonna be complications. At the end of the day, it is this mental block that is so rooted in their relationship to their CGM, their arrows, what is a comfortable number to sit at. So just thinking about like how you relate to your child's diabetes and know that like they're watching and absorbing that. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that I would say is that the healthcare system and your doctor is going to set standards, but like you decide as a family, like what do we want this to look like from a numbers perspective, from a food perspective, from an exercise perspective. And I think the relationship to food is a really important piece. And that's why like I'm very big on showing on Instagram, like, hey, like just today I posted like I went to the mall and I like had this pregnancy craving for
I
like
saw
Annie Ann's pretzels. And I'm like, I never eat this. And I'm like, I want this and I cannot leave without having this. And my blood sugar started at like 100 and ended 2.5 hours later at like, I think it was like 95. So like when you have the tools, when you have the strategies, when you know your body's patterns, like it is so empowering because it allows for a little bit more food freedom, which is such an important part of life.
Right. And I wanted to ask you too, Lauren, if you're comfortable sharing, because I was 17, kind of just at like the crux of leaving home and needing to like spread my wings and be super independent. But then I was kind of like thrust back into my parents' arms, like with this illness or
Yeah.
this condition that is just really just like 24/7 hands on. You need a lot of support. So for I know it was a challenge for my parents, like when to back off, right? When to let me kind of really lean into like the autonomy of managing this illness, or I keep calling it illness, and it doesn't really feel like that. It like, even though that's technically what it is. Um What about what was that like for you? Like, growing up, you were diagnosed at 7 and then you entered the teen years and the adult years. Did you have a similar situation with your parents where you really wanted to take ownership of your diabetes? What was that like?
So the language in my house, from like the second that I got diagnosed was really everybody has something, this is your thing. And
Right.
so it had that like automatic sense of responsibility instilled in me. It doesn't mean that like my parents were like, you got this kid, like go off and just do this on your own, right? But I was pretty much like changing my pump sites, checking my blood sugar, communicating with them how I felt or if I needed juice, things like that by at least I would say like 10. And I was somebody who valued very much freedom. Like still to this day, I think it's really important to know what your values are. Like mine are top two are like impact and freedom. And so impact, that's why I do what I do at Risley, right? And what drove that piece. But freedom for me is once again, I don't want to be held back. And so when I was a teenager, I wanted to like not travel, but like go to sleepover, go to camp by myself, or go to my friend's house to sleep over. And like eventually in college, I wanted to study abroad. And I did those things, but it was always kind of like with this condition of like, you can do anything you want, but like you have to be checking your blood sugar. You can't just be like, not aware of it because this is something that like can be very serious if it's not. So it wasn't a like, if you don't, then you can't go thing, but it was more of this like unsaid kind of theme that was, very omnipresent in our house, I would say.
I love that. I think that's probably, in my opinion, like the best way to kind of set it up right at the start. But I know it's hard when, we're talking about like toddlers or babies or and stuff like that. But I also wanted to talk to you, shift gears slightly because my personal life is so infused and blended with my professional life. I'm a mom. That's like really what I do, how I like really identify first in my life, but it's also what I do for my business. I'm a parenting editor, a reporter, a journalist. Parenting, motherhood is really like also my beat, like what I do, my wheelhouse. And it's similar for you. I mean, surely there's other things you identify with other than being someone with type 1 diabetes, but you also made it your business, your passion, your, like how you said, your impact. So how do you find space to kind of maybe like remove yourself, or do you even need to like to kind of decompress from all of that for a minute? How do you find self-care outside of the world of T1D? Is there something that you use to fill your cup in those moments?
Yeah, I love that, Bethany. It's something that I think is always a like a I would say actually it's something that comes back to technology and the relationship to it, I think, because we are a virtual company. We are very much on Zoom calls all day long. My social media presence, right? Like I show up on social media for my community there. So it's very technology driven. So I think for me, it's always coming back to like, how can I create space just away from my phone? And that really takes the form of, I mean, walking outside, just mindfulness, like being present. I think something that I think about as I step into this like next phase of motherhood is kids don't necessarily like adapt what you tell them to do, from what I've heard. They really are like watching and learning, right? And so I want to try to, as best as I can, like when I am working, be working. So a lot of intentionality and not just be on my phone, scrolling just because the baby can't, do or like, play or talk or whatever yet. Like I think that's what I have in my mind is like one of my biggest intentions is just to be like really present. And I think the baby will feel that. But yeah, it's like I think separation of like technology and just like the people being present with the people around you for me is the biggest thing.
I love that. I think you're going to succeed in that. It sometimes
We'll
can
try.
feel like a big wish for us, even now with my
Yeah.
kids being older. It's like, oh my gosh, I want to be more intentional with my parenting, but it's a constant like readjustment, reprioritizing, all of that. And then just finally, what are you most excited about as you're entering motherhood? It's got to be, it is the most exciting, thrilling, scary time. But is there anything that you're like in particular looking forward to?
Like I don't, man. I like what am I not looking forward to? I would say for the past 10 years, truly like Risley has been my baby, like growing Risley, growing the team, growing the impact. We've, coached over, I think like 1,000 members globally so far in the past couple of years. And that for me has been, my focus and what I've loved the most outside of like my relationships. And I think this is not I think I know that this is going to be, the thing that trumps everything else. And the amount of love that I'm going to feel towards this child is just gonna like, be like so like I just know it's something that I haven't felt before. And so I think I'm excited for like the newness of that and just to be able to experience that type of love that I hear.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for you. And I just have to really say a heartfelt thank you because I do believe you've changed my relationship with diabetes just watching on social media. That's why I expressed I was so excited to come and talk to you just to tell you thank you, like virtually face to face. So thank you so much for everything you do. And I will be following along now as you're into your journey in motherhood. And I'm sure you have a lot of people that are going to be looking to you for like, what does that look like now? Like what the hormonal shifts, all of that, the mental health. And I know you're going to share that all with us in such a great way. So, Lauren, thank you so much.